Joining two metal types drives away every insect. The hidden secret of the Earth battery. Back in 1747, within a stone-walled lab located in Paris, a physicist by the name of Abbé Nollet observed a phenomenon he couldn't make sense of. He placed two identical soil containers right next to each other, exactly the same seeds and identical sunlight exposure. The temperature was also the same. The sole variation was that one container was linked to an electrical power source. Those seeds receiving electricity germinated several days earlier than the rest. Yet that wasn't what baffled him. The peculiar aspect involved the insects. Tiny flies gathered thickly around the untreated pot, but they avoided going near the electrified container. They lingered at the boundary, then veered off as though encountering an invisible barrier. Nollet recorded his findings and made them public. However, for the next 270 years, no one pursued this further. Today, we intend to pick up where he left off. What you are about to learn. This tale spans from the Paris of the 1700s to the battlefield trenches of WWI, up to a 2015 German lab study that was peer-reviewed. Throughout this journey, you will discover a gadget priced under $5, powered solely by moist earth, and could rank among the most powerful natural insect repellents ever recorded. Part of this is confirmed, peer-reviewed research. Another part remains a historical enigma, which the mainstream scientific community has never taken the trouble to clarify. I will clearly distinguish between the two. Welcome to Historia Prime. Let's unlock the archives. Section 1. The experiment that triggered it all. Let us return to that laboratory in Paris to examine in greater detail what truly transpired. It was 1747. Europe was experiencing what historians refer to as the era of electricity. Benjamin Franklin is preparing to launch his well-known kite on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Scientists in France are hurrying to comprehend this unseen energy that can raise hair on end, ignite flames, and, as some think, even bring life to inert matter. At the heart of these studies was Abbé Jean-Antoine Nollet, who was no ordinary scientist. He served as the private physicist to King Louis, the 15th monarch of France. Whenever the king desired a demonstration of electricity, it was not a layman who fulfilled that request. On one notorious occasion, he sent an electric jolt through a line of 200 monks. He did so simply to test whether electricity could pass through human flesh. It could, but Nollet's true enthusiasm was more subdued, and his curiosity focused on one question. Does electricity influence plant growth? Thus, he designed a straightforward, elegant experiment. He used two pewter containers with identical soil, identical amounts of mustard seeds, and identical room and lighting conditions. The water supply was consistent, with just one differing factor. A single container was exposed to an electric current for 10 hours daily. After just 3 days, the outcome became impossible to dispute. The seeds that received electricity had already emerged from the ground. The untreated seeds hadn't even split their outer coats. Nollet recorded every detail and released his results in the year 1749. He determined that electrical stimulation sped up moisture loss from the earth, as well as the rise of sap within plant structures. However, hidden among his writings like a peripheral remark was this additional finding, the one concerning the bugs. He observed that tiny flies gathered without restraint near the non-electrified pot, while the electrified container remained within what he called a region of seclusion. The bugs just refused to come near it, and this is what makes it so extraordinary. Nollet was a careful and precise scientist, and he never overstated things. He didn't speculate on the reason the insects steered clear of the electricity. He merely documented his observations, and he witnessed an unseen barrier that insects refused to cross. The scientific community examined his article, commended his research on how plants grow, yet entirely disregarded his note about the insects. For about 100 years it lay untouched. Part 2. Soil, Metals, and a Chance Finding. Advanced 94 years to 1841. We find ourselves in Edinburgh, Scotland, inside the workspace of a certain Alexander Bain. Bain wasn't a scientist. He was a clockmaker, a tinker, and an inventor, a person who used his hands to solve practical challenges. Abstract philosophical concepts held no appeal for him. His goal was to obtain an inexpensive, dependable electrical supply to run his timepieces. Without having to rely on costly electrochemical cells typical of that period, Bain once conceived an idea that was deceptively straightforward. He grabbed two metallic sheets, one made of copper, the other of zinc. He buried them in the damp ground behind his work area, separated by about a meter. Above ground, he connected a wire between the two and attached a voltmeter. The reading showed about 1 volt, no acids, no chemical solutions, no generator, only two dissimilar metals, and moist soil. Bain had inadvertently discovered fundamental electrochemical principles. The wetness in the earth serves as a natural electrolytic medium, a liquid environment enabling ions to move from one metal to the other. Since zinc has a higher chemical reactivity, it gradually releases electrons, and the copper accumulates them, enabling a continuous flow of current. He named it the Earth Battery, and it functioned as intended. It kept his clocks running for months on end, requiring no upkeep at all, yet this is where the narrative takes a similar turn. Shortly thereafter, Bain observed something peculiar within the ground surrounding his buried metal plates. Earthworms appeared to flourish in the space between the metals. They congregated within the gentle electric field, as though it offered them some advantage. However, biting flies completely vacated the vicinity. Bain was not a biologist. He did not follow up on this finding. Yet another person took it up in 1844. A Scottish estate owner by the name of Robert Forster came across the Earth Battery in his reading. He resolved to experiment with it on a farm-wide level. He set up an array of copper and zinc plates throughout his barley fields, close to Elgin Town in the northeast of Scotland. The findings appeared in the British Cultivator publication during March of 1845. Forster stated that insect harm to his harvest had fallen to almost none, no aphids, no beetles, and crucially, the laborers noted that at twilight, when swarms of stinging flies would typically attack them, the bugs appeared to stop at the field boundaries and retreat. The Royal Society recognized the results as extraordinary. Farming magazines talked about them positively, yet afterward, nothing occurred. No extensive experiments, no subsequent studies. The Earth Battery stayed as just a curiosity, cleverly recorded yet utterly overlooked. Body Segment 3. A farmer who cultivated oats 7 feet tall without any fertilizer. Yet the concept refused to fade away. It simply went hidden, both in the physical earth and in secrecy, until it reemerged once more during the early 1920s. This time, a French engineer took up the cause. His name was Justin Christofleau. Christofleau felt deeply frustrated as he observed French farming practices growing more and more reliant upon artificial chemical fertilizers, costly substances that progressively damaged the earth. Moreover, these failed to solve the ongoing plague of insects that consumed the crops. He had studied the ancient texts on electroculture and was familiar with the work of Nollet and Bain. He was convinced that the planet itself, along with the sky above it, was filled with electrical and magnetic forces resources that farmers had merely abandoned. Therefore, he constructed a device that surely appeared completely crazy to the people living nearby. Imagine a wooden pole standing 25 feet tall, positioned right at the center of an agricultural field. On its summit, complex coils made from copper and zinc wiring extend upwards, as if a peculiar metal blossom beneath the earth. Additional cables spread outward into the moist ground. The whole setup was deliberately oriented from southward to northward, aligning with the planet's magnetic axis. He named these devices electromagnetic Earth-sky antennas. The term may seem dramatic, yet the design was thoroughly intentional. The portion above the surface was constructed to harvest ambient electrical energy identical to the accumulated static electricity just prior to a storm. The subterranean cables accessed what Earth scientists refer to as telluric flows, the naturally occurring electric currents traveling without interruption through the Earth's crust. It was asserted that these combined energies would produce a steady current within the soil, boosting crop growth and repelling unwanted insects. And according to Christofleau's recorded observations, that is precisely what took place. His oat plants grew more than 7 feet high. With no artificial fertilizer, his grapevines, earlier devastated by the disastrous phylloxera infestation that had wiped out vineyards throughout Europe, made a full recovery. They gave abundant harvests of sweet fruit. Most importantly for our narrative, he claimed that the electricity field removed insect pests totally. No chemicals and no sprays were used. His belief was that the electrical waves within the earth interfered with the sensory organs of invasive insects. This rendered the surroundings intolerable for them without causing any harm to the plants, the soil microorganisms, or the earthworms. This wasn't some obscure experiment. Christophe Lowe secured patents for his devices and distributed more than 150,000 units throughout Europe. Whole farms functioned without any pests, relying solely on copper, zinc, and moist soil. So this is the question that ought to keep you awake at night. If 150,000 farmers purchased these devices back in the 1920s, why have you never been informed about them? Theme: how explosives transformed into pesticides. To address that query, we must trace the financial trail, and that trail passes directly through two world wars. In 1912, an international gathering examined the gathered evidence supporting electroculture. The agreement was unmistakable. It was effective. The scientific basis was genuine. Discussions emerged about widespread implementation. Subsequently, in 1914, World War I ripped across the core of Europe's agricultural lands. Countless men abandoned their farms to head to the trenches. The entire agricultural infrastructure, which included the electroculture device networks, was literally demolished. However, another development occurred amid the conflict that would transform farming permanently. The plants that produced munitions for combat, facilities making ammonium nitrate, chlorine gas, and phosphorus-based chemicals, abruptly discovered they had no market once hostilities ceased. They possessed enormous industrial capabilities, held massive reserves of chemicals, and urgently required buyers. The answer was both clever and coldly pragmatic: to redirect the chemicals of warfare into agricultural chemicals. Ammonium nitrate, which serves as the foundation for powerful explosives, was repurposed into nitrogen-based fertilizer. Organophosphates, chemical nerve agents, underwent reformulation to become insecticides. The chemical sector did not merely step into the agricultural field. By the close of World War II, it had completely absorbed agriculture. The metamorphosis was absolute. In 1946, the United States military developed DEET, the compound DEET, in its initial form, created as a deterrent for use in tropical combat. Inside 10 years, it could be found on shelves across the United States. Pause and consider this shift. An innovation conceived in wartime, engineered to shield troops under harsh battle circumstances, was rebranded and sold to households for use at outdoor cookouts. While the Earth Battery, a contraption costing mere pennies, operated using soil and wasn't eligible for patent protection, it was merely overlooked, neither refuted nor dismissed, simply rendered obsolete by a fresh economic landscape. Allow me to quantify this. Currently, the worldwide insect repellent market brings in roughly $5.57 billion annually. The commercial model relies solely on repeated buying. You purchase a container of bug spray, it remains effective for several hours, then insects return. You purchase another can. Now think about the Earth Battery. Copper and zinc wiring costing just a few dollars sunk into the earth, recharged by rainfall, no refills, no subscriptions, no allegiance to any brand. A contemporary journalist expressed it exactly right, even though nobody paid attention. They didn't give up on the Earth Battery because it was ineffective. It was hidden because its effectiveness was too great, extremely affordable, and incredibly durable. It didn't merely keep bugs away. It drove away financial returns. Chapter 5. Contemporary Science. What we can verify today. Let me be completely honest with you, because this is where Historia Prime diverges from other content creators. Every claim I've made about ground batteries deterring winged, mature insects originates from historical records. These records are thoroughly documented. They show uniformity across numerous autonomous sources and 170 years of observation. But none of this has undergone contemporary controlled laboratory testing. No peer-reviewed randomized controlled study on galvanic ground batteries as repellents for airborne insects has ever been published. What is the reason for that? This is a crucial query, and we will revisit it. However, modern science has demonstrated the following, and it's equally astonishing. Now, let's discuss mosquitoes. Mosquitoes cause more human fatalities than any other organism on the planet. Not lions, not sharks, not snakes, but it's mosquitoes, via malaria, dengue, Zika, and numerous other illnesses. They account for an approximate 700,000 deaths each and every year. For decades, our main approach has been to discharge artificial chemicals into the breeding waters where they multiply. In 2015, a team led by Dr. Norbert Becker from the German Mosquito Control Association based in Heidelberg released a study in the peer-reviewed journal. Parasites and vectors altered the paradigm. They utilized basic plastic containers containing water and larvae of mosquitoes, that identical kind of stagnant water where dengue and Zika virus carriers reproduce across urban areas globally. Afterward, they introduced various forms of copper metal, standard euro currency coins, copper pipes, as well as a fine mist of copper metal. The outcome proved catastrophic for the mosquito population at levels of concentration under 500 parts per billion of copper in dissolved form. Each and every mosquito larva perished, all species subjected to the experiment, complete mortality rate. Upon applying spray to the interior of a container using only 2 grams of copper metal, eliminated every larva that just emerged from eggs continuously for as long as 3 months. This underlying process is thoroughly comprehended as copper comes into contact with water and gradually releases copper ions into the water. Inside the larvae, these ions build up and methodically eliminate the gut microbiome, the crucial bacteria required by larvae for digestion of food and for development. In the absence of these bacteria, larval growth is impossible, and they perish. And here's what renders this virtually miraculous for human application: the level of copper that results in total mosquito mortality. 500 parts per billion, that's 4 times below the safety threshold set by the World Health Organization for drinking water. It stands at 2 parts per million. This water, which eliminates all mosquito larvae, is actually safer for consumption than your tap water. Recent findings have appeared, and biological studies have shown that insects, such as mosquitoes, have specialized sensory neurons. These neurons are extremely responsive to copper and zinc ions present in their surroundings. When an area becomes filled with these metallic ions due to gradual galvanic corrosion occurring in damp UPCA, the region turns chemically unattractive to these insects. Or as copper dissolves in stagnant water, the region turns chemically unattractive to these insects. They sense a threat and abandon the area. This isn't fringe science. These findings have been published and reproduced within conventional entomology. Consider the big picture. An earth battery gradually emits copper and zinc ions into wet soil via the process of galvanic corrosion. That's fundamental electrochemistry. There's clear evidence insects are deterred by copper and zinc ions. That's elementary entomology. Historical records depict precisely this phenomenon. Insects steer clear of sites where copper and zinc are interred in moist soil environments. None of these individual facts are disputed. What's lacking is just one controlled experiment to consolidate all these findings. And which party would finance such a study? It's impossible to patent a pair of metals buried in soil, and you cannot trademark the ground itself. The lack of company-funded investigation does not prove that a technique is ineffective. It indicates that no individual can make money by demonstrating its success. Segment 6. Your $5 plan. Here's the method to experiment on your own. The construct you are creating is a fundamental galvanic cell. 2 distinct metals serve as the electrodes. The moist soil bridging them functions as the electrolyte. Once water brings the 2 metals into contact, the flow of electrons originates from the more reactive zinc toward the copper. Meanwhile, ions gradually diffuse into the adjacent ground. This identical chemical process drives each and every battery you've ever utilized. It is merely distributed across a plot of land rather than confined within a cylindrical casing. This is the plan you need to follow. Gather 3 items available at any hardware store. First, get some 1/4 gauge bare copper wire. It has to be uncoated, solid metal. This allows it to interact directly with the surroundings. Second, you'll need galvanized steel wire. This 1/4 gauge galvanized steel has a zinc coating. That coating acts as the reactive anode. Third, you need a wooden stake or bamboo rod, roughly 3 feet in length. Cut about 3 feet of the copper wire and wind it into a loose coil around the bottom section of the stake. Next, take 3 feet of the galvanized zinc wire and wrap it around the same stake using the same method. Both metals must make contact with the earth once the stake is placed into the ground. However, the copper and zinc wires must not come into direct contact with one another above the soil surface. Hammer the stake into the earth. Ensuring a burial depth of 6 to 12 inches is the absolutely essential condition. The ground needs to be moist. Moisture is key. It acts as the electrolyte-enabling ion movement. When dealing with arid ground, empty a bucket of water near the bottom to trigger the system into action. When setting up a camp, construct 3 stakes arranged in a broad triangular formation. Place one stake close to your tent, another near the cooking space, and the third adjacent to the fire. A triangle formed by 3 stakes can protect an area of about 225 square feet. As for stagnant water pools, rainwater containers, bird baths, and every site where mosquitoes reproduce, do this. Just place a coiled length of uninsulated copper wire straight into the water and let it remain. According to the study from Heidelberg, this single action ought to result in almost complete death of mosquito larvae without adding any poisonous substances into your environment. The overall expense is less than $5. There is no need for batteries or refills, and rainfall naturally replenishes the setup. A single camper from Ontario experimented with this triangular arrangement. He noted that the mosquitoes, which had been unyielding the night before, completely ceased coming near his campsite. He described them lingering about 15 feet away, as though they were hitting an invisible wall. Is this a formal, controlled experiment? No. But does it align with 270 years of independent reports by Nole, Bain, Forster, and Cristoforo? Without a doubt, the sole method to be certain is to test it personally. Allow me to close this loop. In 1749, Abbé Nollet observed insects fleeing from electrified soil inside a Parisian laboratory. In 1841, Alexander Bain powered a clock using soil and noticed the flies had disappeared. In 1845, Robert Forster documented the absence of pests in fields without pests across his Scottish farmland. During the 1920s, Justin Christophe Lowe sold 150,000 devices to European farmers who insisted they worked. Then the wars arrived. Then the chemical industry emerged, and a quarter of a millennium of silence and meticulous observation was replaced by the hiss of an aerosol can. The conventional scientific establishment will tell you that further research is needed. They are correct. It is needed. Yet for 270 years, not a single individual has provided funding for it. It is because it's impossible to generate profit from 2 metals buried in the soil. Meanwhile, copper continues to act as a conductor. Zinc still undergoes its chemical reactions. Every moist patch of earth across the globe functions as a battery, just waiting for someone to activate it. The scientific principles behind copper ions and the fact that they destroy mosquito larvae are not merely theoretical, they are a documented, proven reality. Furthermore, the historical evidence regarding galvanic fields shows that their ability to drive away insects is far too consistent, it is far too widespread, and it is far too thoroughly recorded to be dismissed as mere chance. We exchange this elegant natural bond between copper, zinc, water, and soil for an aerosol can. It contained a chemical compound which was originally developed for combat in jungle environments, not because the previous method proved ineffective. However, since the novel method generated profits, invest just $5 this weekend. Purchase the wire and enter the metals. Apply a water film and observe the outcome, and share it using the hashtag number #EarthBatteryTest. If a sufficient number of us perform this and collectively produce sufficient proof which no company would ever finance, we will no longer require authorization. We will own the data without relying on the authorities. History's most profound mysteries frequently lie concealed directly below us. This has been Historia Prime. Keep questioning.